Welcome to Sober Sunrise, a podcast bringing you AA speaker meetings with stories of experience, strength, and hope from around the world. We bring you several new speakers weekly, so be sure to subscribe. We hope to always remain an ad-free podcast, so if you'd like to help us remain self-supporting, please visit our website at sober-sunrise.com. Whether you join us in the morning or at night, there's nothing better than a sober sunrise. We hope that you enjoy today's speaker.
My name is Forrest. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date at the moment is February 22nd of 2014. That is my second white chip. My first white chip was from 1992 to 11. So 11 to 2011. I had 19 years. So when talking to you guys about the first step, it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of ways we can do this in 40 minutes, right? I'm definitely not the guy to go speak as long as you want because you guys didn't bring sleeping bags or dinner. So probably not a good idea to say that. What I do want to do is I'll make you guys a part of this, right? How many people in this room have more than 2 years? Interesting. How many people here have completed amends to the best of their ability? Okay, I know what we're going to do. Again, because of the way I got sober, I could talk to you about coming off the streets of California and not having any life skills and walking into Alcoholics Anonymous. I can talk to you about bottoming out in Alcoholics Anonymous and having to go back and work a first step. I can talk to you about the mindset of the lie I had to buy into to leave Alcoholics Anonymous and how to unwork the first step. And I can talk to you about coming back while still having all my stuff and knowing that I'm dying inside. We'll do a little bit of all of that tonight, I think, based on what we got. All right, before I get going, I do want to thank the group, because once I get going, I won't remember to say that. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share. It's always a privilege, especially in this room. This room has been integral in my life for 25 years, probably. There's been giants that are no longer with us that I heard in this room. Maurice, my dad, Rick, Paul E., Eddie O., the list could go on and on. There are giants that I met in this room that really changed my life and taught me how to be a man. So it's always a pleasure to be able to, an honor to be able to speak in a room like this. The other thing for housekeeping I like to do is, I like to just kind of stand at the podium and take a breath and kind of lift my left leg. And that way I always start off the meeting on the right foot. I promise the jokes get better. Okay. I was 6 months sober, and I was walking into a clubhouse in Cincinnati, Ohio, called Oak Street. And I was looking for a couple old timers, and they were really old and they had a ton of years. They must have been like 50 and had like 20 years. Really old. And I was convinced AA didn't work, and I was sick of them saying it gets better and better and better and better. So I went and found these guys to say, look, it doesn't get better and better. I'm 6 months sober. It's not feeling any better. And I came to explain to them that Alcoholics Anonymous didn't work. Now, they had kind of watched me over the 6 months and, said little funny things like, yeah, that one's called envy. That one's called lust. They thought they were real funny. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and for a moment, I really thought this thing was going to work. Like, I really felt alive inside. I saw that you guys had been where I was and were somewhere else, but, I gave it a shot and it wasn't working. And so I went to explain it to these guys, one of them, I was already in, position to have this big, dramatic conversation. And he's like, how's it going? And I replied with, it'd be great if this thing worked. And he said, oh, really? Have a seat. And somehow with this Jedi mind control, suddenly there was like 20 old timers around me. And I'm like, oh. And they said, so what have you done since you got to Alcoholics Anonymous? And they said, do you have a sponsor? And I said, well, I did. And they said, well, what happened? And they said, well, you guys told me to get somebody who had what I wanted. So I went and found the guy who had a Porsche. He had this bleach blonde girlfriend. He looked like he had some money. And you guys didn't mention anything spiritually. What I heard was go find somebody who has what you want. And so about 4 months into recovery, from the podium, he decided that he wasn't really alcoholic, he was just gay. Turned out the Porsche was leased, and the girl that was with him admitted she was a gold digger just trying to get at his money. And I realized I really didn't know anything about getting a sponsor, but AA didn't work. That's about what I figured out. I had tried some retail therapy that got me broke. I lost my license 6 months sober on points.
Wow.
Because I have a little bit of a heavy foot, and so the road trip thing was out. And I was very uncomfortable in a lot of meetings because of my dating practices, right? I was part of the young people's group, and she was there, and she was over there, and she was over, and it got a little uncomfortable. And so, I'm thinking AA really doesn't do so much for me, and they kind of laughed about that. They go, have you worked any of the steps? And I go, yeah, I'm on an inventory. They said, great, what's the first step? And I got all these dictionary and information in my head. I'm ready. I said, well, we admitted we were alcoholic. Actually, I said, I admitted I was alcoholic. And they said, we? And I said, right. And they said, okay, what's alcoholic? And I go, what do you mean? They go, well, why do you think you're alcoholic? And I said, well, when I was 13 years old, I moved from Cape Cod, Massachusetts to Hollywood, California. And in my first 6 months of junior high school, I was ostracized. I was ridiculed. I was made fun of. I looked like a New Englander in a Hollywood environment. Not a good target not a good way to dress if you don't want to be a target. Feeling pretty uncomfortable, and I was outside ditching, debating how I was going to kill myself. And some kids walked up, and long story short, showed me where a 13-year-old could buy beer, and I got my first Mickey's Big Mouth 40 ouncer. And I had seen that had been a solution for people in the past. I had seen that work for many people. I was very curious. If that worked for them, maybe that would work for me. So I put about 3/4 of a Big Mouth 40 ouncer in me, and something happened. And they talk about the promises. We read the 9-step promises before this meeting. A lot of those promises came true for me that day. I found a new freedom and a new happiness. I didn't regret anything. I didn't care what you thought of me. I didn't care what you thought about me. I didn't care what money I had, what I looked like. I didn't care about anything. I was comfortable. It's like my skin suddenly fused to my body. And I had a magical moment. And I said, wow, if I'm feeling uncomfortable, if I'm starting to live in a way where I'm not feeling life, like this is a great solution. And I had a little epiphany that day. And I told these guys that story, and I go, that's why I'm alcoholic. And they go, well, that's probably a pretty good reason, but that's not why you're alcoholic. Not a good sign. Not why you're alcoholic. I said, well, let me tell you some other stuff then. I would do stupid things when I was drinking. As a matter of fact, I had been property of the LA County jail system. I had quite a fellowship among the substations in my area with the law enforcement. We well known in my area, if you just wanted to go get ridiculously drunk and party, that I was your guy. So you add that together with that story, that's what makes me alcoholic, right? And they said no. We've seen a lot of people that have had drinking problems, done really stupid stuff, and for whatever reason decide to quit one day. That's not what makes you alcoholic. I said, well, what does? They said, well, in the big book, we talk about 2 things to tell if you're alcoholic. By the way, this is the big book. It's called the book. Alcoholics Anonymous is the name of the book. Fellowship named after the book, just in case you had put it right there. They pointed at the book and they said, so have you ever found the first step in here? And I'm like, academically, I've got information. And I said, yeah, we conceded to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. Great, so what is it to be alcoholic? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, right here it says, if when you honestly want to, you find that you can't keep yourself from picking up. And if once you pick up, you can't control the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. So they go, so what makes you alcoholic? And I said, oh, you mean the times that I really wanted to not drink and I went and drank anyways? And they're like, yes. And I said, tell us about that, right? And so I'm crawling around in my head and I start remembering some experiences I had. But the most vivid ones come from the times where my life was a train wreck and I just started to put it back together, right? I've been unemployed, I've been single, and I'm just starting to talk to somebody, and I'm just starting to get this job going, and I got these responsibilities and things I'm supposed to do, and suddenly something would grab me by the back of the head and say, it's time. And I'm like, no, it's not time. I cannot go drinking, I cannot go party tonight. And it would say, no, it's time. And I'm like, no, and I'm putting my shoes on, fighting with myself and cursing at myself and grabbing I'm like, I can't be going out tonight. I really shouldn't be doing this. Why am I doing this? This is really stupid. Why do I find... And I'm sitting there yelling and arguing with myself while I'm driving to go do my thing. And I couldn't understand why I was doing it. And at some point, rather than go absolutely crazy, I'd buy into this idea that, this time is going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to be the life of the party. I'm going to do all these great things. And the reality is I would just put 3 in me as quickly as I could. And then I became something else. Then the turbos kicked on. I called it Terminator eyes. And many of you guys that are with me tonight have heard me talk about this, but literally something in my brain switches and it's like the mechanical thing goes on and suddenly you all become resources. You're no longer people. It's like, how can I leverage you to get more? Are you going to get in the way of me doing more? Because if you're going to get in the way, you got to go. If you're going to help the party going, you're my best friend. Try not to have a feeling and use any emotion or feeling you had toward me as leverage to get anything I could out of you so we could keep this thing going. And if you're willing to keep this thing going and you're going to play it, then we're best friends and we'll roll. And everybody around me suddenly went from a nice, live, active, interactive person to a resource. And I'm scanning you up and down trying to assess how you're going to help me keep this party going. For me, the way I would drink is, I'd find condiments or I'd black out pretty quick. So I would stay up for 3 days. Anything that sped me up was a good condiment. Crystal Crank, speed, that didn't matter, whatever it was. My drug of choice, they talk about your drug of choice. Mine was yours. And if you had something that sped you up, all the better. I would continue to party for 3 days, pass out, pour half a refrigerator down my throat, take another little nap because I had so much food in me, get up, hop up, and then try to show up at life again. And it's really hard to live a life when you're like that. I mean, you can't just show up at a job 3 days late and go, hey, I'm here. Or, your friend's like, hey, sorry, I was, like, where you been for 4 days? I guess normal people don't do that. I tried to pull it off. They noticed. So at some point I decided I didn't really want to be around people that had any ties to normal life. And so if you had a job, if you had a family, if you had a legal revenue, if you were tied to something as part of the world that would expose my way of living, I really couldn't hang out with you anymore. So even though I had a place I could sleep, I chose to sleep on the street and just kind of run around with that because it was a lot easier to interact with that than to walk into a house and look at somebody and try to explain to them something I didn't know. Because they would give me that look and ask that same question of, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Right? And they said, that's what it's like to have no choice, right? Alcoholics Anonymous is for people that don't have the ability to keep themselves from starting. And once they start, usually can't control how much they take. And if you have that, and you can't pull that off on your own power, then we have something here that might tap you into a power that'll allow you to stop. If you can pull that off on your own, the book says hats off to you. Right? It talks about a couple tests. It talks about, try to control drinking. I never tried that one, but try control drinking. Drink abruptly, stop. Drink abruptly, stop. See if try to drink 4 drinks and stop. Do that a few times. See how that works out for you. And it said, if you're truly alcoholic, you have a very rare chance of success. I forgot the word. It talks about another test. It says if you're not alcoholic and you think you can leave it alone for a year. Don't drink it all for a year. Don't do anything mind-altering for a year. See how that works out for you. Now, if you're as crazy as I am, I get so miserably uncomfortable inside of myself that doesn't become an option. I start to think suicidally. I start to think crazy. I get so uncomfortable that thing grabs you by the back of the head and says, oh no, it's time. Right? So it talks about 2 tests that you can try if you're questioning it. I wasn't really there. I kind of knew what the problem was. I just didn't really understand what I was doing here. So this is a book of actions. The first action being take an honest look at yourself and tell yourself, can you stop? Right? And it doesn't care, it talks about if a mere code of morals or philosophy or intellect was sufficient to suffice. We would do that. We can try to muster willpower. We can explain to ourselves why this is bad and we shouldn't be doing this and replay the tape and all these other crazy things I hear about. Intellectually put this idea in your head that this is bad. But if I hit the right spot, I get that level of discomfort. That thing comes inside of me and says it's time. I don't have power to say no. There's no information I can obtain. And I have tried to obtain this information. I mean, just to disclose some of my craziest, I sat in general service in New York where this book archive is contained and studied manuscripts and tried to find the secret information, because if I had the right level of information, I might crack the code. There is none that I can find, and I had resource. This is a program of action. It is an action-oriented thing. And if you perform certain actions, let me restate this. Information is great to the extent you use it to find God and turn it into action. I was using information like I would a pill to try to fix me. I don't recommend that. You ever want to have that conversation, anybody? Please come find me. We'll get into that in a minute. So when I came in, I realized, I really wasn't working Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't really following a process. They went on to talk about Alcoholics Anonymous being a 3 legacy thing, right? They talked about 3 actions I had to do every day. And me with the attention span of a gnat in a windstorm, I really couldn't absorb any of that. But they talked about 3 actions, and they equated it to you're dying of cancer, and we're going to give you 3 pills to take every day. And if you take these 3 pills, you might be in a recovered state. You will no longer be talked into drinking when you don't want to, and you won't have to fight it off because you won't be drinking. Talked about 3 actions. They talked about unity, service, recovery. They talked about 12 steps. The most important step you're ever going to work is the one you're on. Do that one. They talked about unity. They talked about meetings like this. They talked about go into the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, become part of the we. Don't listen to people speak. You don't got to fact check them. You don't even have to relate to them. You don't even have to like them. You got to look for God inside of them. Where were they able to do something? Where was God able to do something for them that they know they couldn't do for themselves? Where did God enter their life? Look for God inside of people. Because if you can find God inside of people, the gift I've gotten out of that is that I've gotten to see the God inside of me. Because I can't see God in me. I can look in the mirror. I can try all. It's like watching hair grow. I don't have hair, but if I did have hair, it'd be like watching it grow. Yeah, we'll retract that. I'm sure. Strict that from the record. But in essence, I can't see God inside of me. But if I see God inside of you, for a brief moment, I get to see God inside of you. So go be part of the week. Go into the fellowship. Go listen to people. Go find where God's moving around inside of them. And we'll get into God later on this week or in this series. But in short, my definition of God is probably not your definition of God. And whatever definition of God you have is great. And most people that have trouble with the word God are actually having trouble with the definition they have. Go find another one. We'll get into that later. They talked about a third part. They talked about recovery, steps. They talked about unity, sitting in the we. They talked about service. They said Alcoholics Anonymous is a program of helping other people. And it made sense to me, right? And we've been joking lately. I've read 30, 40 self-help books. Never long-term changed a single behavior. I read one Help Others book. Changed everything. This is a book about helping other people, right? This whole thing is about service. It's about taking somebody like me who's a liar, thief, taker, who you can't give enough to because I'll take more. If it's free, I'll take 3. I don't care what it is. And transforming it into somebody who tries to give and help. And if I can tap into that, that's what this book is doing. I get to have a magical life. And when I got here, that made no sense to me. And when I got here, that was the last thing in the world I wanted. And actually, Alcoholics Anonymous truly gave me the last thing in the world I wanted. Me. I didn't want anything to do with me. But you gave me being comfortable inside of me. Where I wasn't fighting off everything, every thought, every intention. I wasn't worried about you, what you were doing, what you had, what you thought of me. Just like that kid who got that Mickey's Big Mouth inside of him, where I just didn't care anymore. I was comfortable. I was okay. That's the gift of what Alcoholics Anonymous gives me, right? So when we start with this first step, that's where the magic starts. But it really comes down to that honest question. Do I have this? Because if I have the power to pull off my life, why am I going to go seek this power? If I don't have the power to keep myself from starting, there's a solution here for me. And we'll go on to the rest of the steps later over the next few weeks. But let's just say that at certain points of my recovery, in the first 19 years, there were points where I felt again, like I didn't belong in Alcoholics Anonymous, where I again felt uncomfortable inside of myself, where I again felt like this thing just kind of isn't working. I felt kind of a rough edge. And now I've got sponsees, I've got responsibilities, I've got commitments, I've got groups, I've got people that look at me like I might actually know what I'm saying sometimes. I don't. I get rare moments where the two squirrels line up and I get a coherent brain thought that runs in the little treadmill. But what I started to realize, is that there are times where I can unwork the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've unworked them back to step 1 before, sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, doing meetings, helping people, right? And the way that looks for me is that suddenly I'm helping people, and I'm not able to fix them. They're not listening to me. I am affected by what you're doing. I suddenly became very much of an I program, And suddenly the first step became I admitted, I'm doing, and I want. I got rid of the we somewhere, right? And I have found it necessary at many points in my recovery, and I actually do this every morning these days, to go back to check in with that first step concession. Do I suddenly think I have the power to manage my life? Do I suddenly think I have the power to stay sober? Do I think I have the power to keep somebody else sober when I can't even keep myself sober? And to spend a minute with that. Because very often I think the answer is yes. Right? But if I spend some time with myself and I really look at why I'm here, and I look at that first step concession, I start to realize I don't have the power to run my life. How would I have the power to run yours? At best, I can show you some tools I've acquired, some actions I've taken, some experiences I've had with them, and hope to God you find what I found. And when I do that, my life's great. When it starts to become about me doing stuff, or you not listening to me, or me thinking I'm, using the steps or the fellowship as a way to kind of, forge my life into something I want, recreating my life in Forrest's way, I end up in some crazy places. And I bottomed out in Alcoholics Anonymous a ton of times, trying to think that I had something to do with this thing, right? So in the morning, I really try to wake up and rework that first step and remember why I'm here. I don't have the power to pull this off. And if I don't have the power to pull this off, then really I'm probably living on God's power. Whatever that word means to you, we'll get into that next week or in a couple of weeks. Don't worry if that word turns you off. We'll get there. So if I'm living on God's power, what am I doing with God's power when I get it? Right? That's my greatest question for my sponsees when they get up. They're all caught up in stuff. I'm like, so what are you doing with God's power? Right? For the first 10 years of my recovery, I would call that old timer who sat me down and showed me what the first step was. He gave me some guy, Jake. That was the first time I went through the steps with a guy, and I had an experience with that. But I would still call that guy who walked me through, and it would go like this. I'd be whining and complaining about, and he'd be like, pink or green. Without question, it was always money or girlfriend. For the first 10 years of my recovery, I was absolutely convinced if you gave me 10 grand and a girlfriend, my problems are solved. I was sure that was the solution to everything. Turns out they make your life a little more complicated. Spoiler, sorry. He'd say, which of the three aren't you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm not really helping anybody. I'm showing up at some meetings. Are you looking for God in people? Not really. What step are you on? I'm in 10 and 11. What are you doing with those steps? Well, I'm kind of reading them. You're not working the steps either. No, I'm not. He'd be like, go to a meeting, find a newcomer project. Work the step you're on. I want to hear about your 10 and 11. I want to see that written 11-step inventory. I want to hear about that 10-step vision of God's will for you. I want to see some work in those steps. And I want you to go to some meetings and really go look for God in people. Call me when you're done. And I don't care what problem I went to him with. I don't care how many times I went. And I really wanted to come to him with some really good ones. That's all, that exact conversation is what he would say and hang up on me. And I really wanted to call him back one day and go, I did all three and it didn't work. Never got to make that call. A is a really simple program if I want to work this, right? It's 3 legacies, right? You can find a sponsor. You can do a 90-90 and try to get embedded in a group. You can find some people to run with. You can find people to walk you through this. And I've seen AA to be a springboard. I've seen people spring into life in the most amazing, miraculous ways. But to me, the strength of how far I can get into this really is contingent on this first step. Do I really see that I can't control my life? Because from that, the whole thing opened up to me, right? I love the story in the second edition, the forward of the second edition. It talks about Bob struggling to get sober. Bill approaches him, Bill Wilson, Bob, first two guys, AA. Spoiler if you hadn't gotten that far yet. And he approaches Bob, and Bob's like, I don't know what you can tell me about God. I know everything there is to know about God. I've been prayed to, prayed on, prayed over, baptized, saved. I got people praying for me right now. I got people wanting to pray for me. I got places that want to take me to show me what God is. God's not working for me. But when he heard Dr. Soper, when he heard Bill's description of alcoholism, and realized that he had it, and realized that the real question was, can you actually stop on your own power from drinking? And if not, go seek God for that. He began to pursue a spiritual remedy with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. So Bob was stuck, knew everything there was to know about God. When he actually worked a first step, when he had that inner concession, when he had a moment where he realized he really couldn't do it and he needed to obtain a power outside of himself to do that, that's when he got sober. And so I often think about that, because I kind of came in with Bill where I knew the problem. I don't think God's going to fix it. And at some point when I came back, years sober with all these responsibilities, bottoming out in Alcoholics Anonymous, feeling completely uncomfortable inside of myself, thinking I'm running a show that I'm not, I had to go back to that inner concession. I had to go back and go, do I remember what I'm doing here? 15 years sober, my life had arrived, man. My life's just unfolding in miraculous ways. I came here off the streets of Hollywood, California. I didn't know how to eat 3 times a day. I forgot to cut my nails. Showering every day, that was novel. Going to bed at night and waking up in the morning, these are all very new things. I learned everything decent about how to be a man by watching men in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned everything about how not to be a decent man watching people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. You will meet some of the sickest and some of the healthiest people on the planet here. And the scary part is we're capable of being either one on any given day, right? But somehow I actually learned how to be a human being. Somehow I got a job. Somehow I was no longer on the street. Somehow I was comfortable enough inside of myself to attract a mate and have a child. And I'm showing off that child to my grandparents. And I moved to Florida for some living amends, and I meet her, and we have the kid. And I've got my grandparents here. Grandparents were married 60 years. Role models to me in every sense of the word of what it was to be a decent person. Love them endlessly. They had patience with me of saints. Actually, it's more my grandmother, but my grandfather railed the coattails, so I give him credit. They treated me in ways that they shouldn't have for a very long time. Without enabling me, they loved me for a long time. And so when I got sober and I became part of this thing, one of the reasons I moved here was to make living amends to them. And I'm with this girl, her name's Christine, and she lives with her grandmother and her mother. And on Mother's Day, we go over to my grandparents and we get a picture of my mom's there, and there's 5 generations of women. And we go over to her grandmother's house and we get again 4 or 5 generations of women, and we have these this magical day. 20 months from that day, everybody who was in my little world at that time, which was my grandparents and her family, and every Sunday I'd go scuba diving with a friend of mine, Larry, who I met in this program. Long story short, within 20 months, everybody I was close to died. My grandmother died. My grandfather died. My friend Larry, who I went diving with every Sunday, who had a boat, mysteriously drowned. Her grandmother died. Her mother died. Then my daughter's mom died. Here's a 4-year-old. By the way, your support system's gone, and most people in Florida now are also departed. And I went into a really dark place. And you guys tried to rally and talk to me, and you guys tried to talk to me and try to find me, and I wasn't having it. I didn't want to hear it. I just was not ready to talk about God or my resentments or any of it. I really just didn't want to know about any of it. And one day I looked at this little girl and I said, you know what? If for nothing else, I got to do it for her. She didn't ask to be born. She's just here. And I knew where to go. And I knew what the problem was. I did not have the power to pull off my life. I did not have the power to make myself comfortable inside of myself. And as well read as I was, as well funded as I was, as well researched as I was, a mere code of morals or better philosophy were sufficient. Many of us would not come in these rooms. I had all the intellectual information. I had all these things I could theoretically do. None of it worked. When I admitted that I needed help and that I needed to find a God, and I sat in these rooms looking for it, slowly but surely my life came back online. Because it works regardless of what you think about it, regardless of whether you like it. A doesn't care what you think. A doesn't care if you have an opinion or thought, if you think this is crazy, if you think these people are crazy. I do sometimes. Doesn't matter. What actions are you willing to do in your life? This is an action-oriented program. And it's great to study it, and the traditions in history are rich, and we can get into archives. I'd love to have those conversations about pre-AA history and Oxford groups and Washingtonians, and how Bill got sober and the Oxford group. I can go into these academic tirades and all this information, but that's not really important with regard to staying sober. What is important is that I take all that information and I transform it into action. And for me, the actions need to be in 3 areas: unity, service, recovery. And if I'm working actions in those 3 areas, my life gets better every time. Regardless what. Because life's going to come at you. Life is going to beat you down. Are you willing to do actions to keep moving? 19 years sober. I decided I was going to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, for anybody who's had time in recovery, who's ever really kind of worked a program and gotten really comfortable in recovery and had a life come out of that recovery, in order to leave Alcoholics Anonymous, it just required to leave, you have to buy into some kind of lie. And that lie, I've heard great ones. As soon as people come back, I'm always like, what'd you buy into? What was it? I want to know. For me, the lie I bought into was, y'all don't know what you're talking about. See, I have studied Alcoholics Anonymous. I have been in the archive rooms. I have information. I'm listening to you talk. You don't sound like you're talking. The problem really is that Alcoholics Anonymous is spiritual kindergarten. And I'm going to go into college. So I'm going to go to self-realizational yoga centers. And I'm going to meditate with these guys who meditate for 8 hours a day. And I'm going to go to the church drop-in center. And I'm going to go help drunks there. And I'm going to work this unity, service, recovery in all these advanced areas and places. And I'm going to go pull that off. And I kept saying the word I. At some point, after about 10 years sober, that first step really read to me. I admitted I was powerless. Because I didn't want to be part of the we anymore. Y'all didn't know what you were doing anyway. I really didn't want to be anything to do with the we. Because y'all are crazy. Now, keep in mind, I crawled out of a dumpster. Living on the street. Literally, it was like an apartment that could have been a dumpster. That was abandoned. Thought we were pulling off magic because we'd sneak into construction sites to get showers. Knew where to steal food that hadn't quite been lost yet, or find food that had recently been put away in the trash can. I was literally living out of... So, me of such high moral fiber and high coming, I decided you guys are nuts. And because I'd arrived now. I'm 19 years sober, man. I mean, I work in a corporate entity. I got a new car. I got a house. I'm raising a kid. I've arrived. I'm sorry y'all haven't, but I've arrived. You guys are crazy. And so I made a decision that AA was spiritual kindergarten and that I was going to go work the program somewhere else. And so I left, and I did that for about 6 months sober. And then she showed up. She did yoga. Yeah, that one. And so now it was like, I'm going to dabble a little, because really I'm free to go anywhere I want as long as I'm working a spiritual program. See, now I'm twisting in other stuff into nuance. Because it does say in the book that we're free to go anywhere, so, that people that are using and are drinking, not using, that are drinking are capable of going as long as we have a sufficient reason to be there. Meaning maybe a wedding or maybe some kind of, and I did what I needed to do and I left. I didn't sit there and steal vicarious pleasure at the bar. Anyways, I started twisting around information in the book that I had been very high and moral about, and I started suiting it to fit my life. And so I'm going to work spiritually, and if I'm working spiritually, then I'm free to occasionally have a drink. As a matter of fact, I'm a director now, so I need to go to my boss's house and occasionally have a drink with him, and that'll help my career. And you know, I'm so far, I'm a different person. I got a different thing going on. Okay, that lasted about 9 months, and it came back. And the last 6 times I went out, Steve was with me on one of them. Shout out to Steve. Oh, by the way, be careful who you hang out with in this program and who you're nice or not nice to. Okay? Because I brought him back to his first meeting after he had some time. And when I went out, I had some time. Guess who brought me back to my first meeting? So, you never know. In this room, by the way. 10 years ago. I lost what I was saying. Anybody?
Raising a kid.
Yeah. I got it going on. So, last six drinks. Yeah, I want to really forget about that. Thank you, Pete. All right. So last time I went out, it looked like this. Okay. I have to go to a very important dinner function. All my bosses and management are there, and I'm going to have a few drinks. It's a birthday party and leave. Because I'm already kind of doing some weird stuff. This drinking thing's starting to bubble up a little bit. I'm going to show. This time I got it. And I went over to this guy, and they had Fireball. Fireball tastes like cinnamon to me. I love cinnamon. I couldn't taste the alcohol. It just tastes like a cinnamon drink. By the time I left, people were puking. Couples were fighting. People were crying. I was never allowed in that house again. I was force-feeding people to drink. The kid who was at the party, who shouldn't have even been at the party, I think he drank. I was never allowed in that house again. And I left that house feeling like, these guys are lightweights, man. Let's go to the bar. I mean, I'm ready to really do it now. Like, these guys don't even get, like, and I'm already thinking about white stuff. And suddenly I realized I had this moment of clarity, and thank God for God. I had a moment of clarity like, yeah, I think you're off the tracks. And that was my last drink. And I am blessed, I am grateful that happened. Now keep in mind, I'm 2 years out. I'm still working a 10th and 11th step because I'm crazy. I'm still upon awakening, upon retiring. I have not stopped doing that for 30 years. Yeah, I got to admit, I was lying to myself in some of that 11th step about, who I owed amends to. And it might be a little fuzzy on who did what. There might have been some stretching of my, vision of God's will for me in 10. But I was trying to do something. I mean, I was still working some of this. So God was still in my mind. I never walked away from God. I never walked away from the legacy of Alcoholics Anonymous. I walked away from the weed. So when I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous, I went to look at a first step. I knew the problem. I had just failed the control test. That one was pretty good. Like I got that one out of the way. Check. I knew God could bring me back to sanity if I did the actions to seek Him, if I unblocked myself from whatever that is. I had experience with that. I had decades of that. I watched my life go in a magical way with it. I lived a life of coincidences and just stuff beyond my wildest dreams. Now, I'm coming back into Alcoholics Anonymous. I just bought a pre-construction house. I have a brand new car that's the same year of the year I'm in. I've got a director title at a job. I got reports who have reports. I've got everything that I need. Yet I was dead inside and I was petrified. Because I knew I had unleashed a genie that if I didn't put that back in a bottle, I was done. And thank God for that clarity. Because many of us do not come back. If you go out, do not think you're going to have an easy time getting back because you're hearing my story or because you're having thoughts. I got lucky. I had fortunately stayed grounded in this thing enough and had enough AA people still in my life just in case that when I pulled the ripcord, there was things there to land. And I made it back in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, working a first step after having 19 years is weird, right? The biggest difference for me, though, was suddenly I could hear you guys talk again. It was magical. Because when I left, you guys were talking, and I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And suddenly you were talking, and I heard God in your lives. And I could hear what you were saying, and I could see God shifting around things. And suddenly when I read the steps, I started to see that we again. And it wasn't I admitted, it was we admitted. And I suddenly remembered the power of we. And suddenly you guys didn't seem so crazy. You're all still crazy as hell. but not as crazy. And somewhere in that, I saw again that I do not have the power to pull off my life on any front. My craziness is deep, man. I can sit and look at somebody on a park bench with one shoe and one boot and some jacket that don't fit and pants that belong to somebody else inside out and go, man, what's wrong with that guy? Why does he keep drinking? And if I stare at him long enough, I can think, wow, he's doing it wrong. Move over, let me show you how to do that correctly. Because I have that kind of insanity. And the scariest part of the whole show is I don't have the ability to stop that. That thing comes and grabs me by the back of the head and says, it's time. I'm going. I can yell at myself, scream at myself, whatever. I'm going. You know, there are times I was high before I even put it in me. I felt it. I was good. I had to go to the bathroom. Something. I mean, like I was on it. I had a physiological reaction before I even put it in my body. And I couldn't stop it. No matter what I wanted to do, how much I had to do, what was important, what wasn't important, I couldn't stop it. And so I need to remember when I'm working a first step that I'm seeking a power that can stop that. That is the first step of recovery. And if I can get a hold of that, and I can remember this is a we thing, that I need you guys because I can't see God in me without you. If I can remember that this is about trying to help people, not enable them, I have a shot, right? Today I have a pretty magical life, and most of that's because I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I have sponsees who have sponsees who have sponsees. Congratulations on your 1 year. Who occasionally have sponsees, right? So there's a sponsee that occasionally has sponsees. I stay in this thing. I stay grounded in this thing. I try to keep one hand on something that's filling the cup. As my sponsor says, I don't have a cup, I have a thimble. Don't be arrogant and think you have a cup. He loves me. I try to keep my thimble full, and I try to give that out to the next guy. And I keep trying to fill it and give it out. And if I do that, I get to have a magical life. You know, we'll get into this more as the weeks go on, but as a result of doing that kind of work, again, it gives me the last thing in the world I wanted, which was me comfortable inside of me. And when I'm comfortable inside of me, all of a sudden magical coincidences start to bombard my life in ways that don't even make sense. Jobs, relationships, opportunities. Things start to flood into my life in ways that don't even make sense. And suddenly I find myself in a completely different place with no idea how I got there. Because not only does that first step power, that concession, that God power that keeps you sober, keep me from that thing grabbing me by the back of the head and saying it's time and pulling me into places I don't want to be. It also has the power to keep my life going when I'm in here. Because I come up with some other crazy ideas while I'm in here. Because I suddenly see stuff you have that I want to have, or that I want to have so you think I'm somebody, or why do you have that and I don't have that, or why do they like you and I don't like me, and why do they... I can come up with the craziest stuff and make my life uncomfortable. I can come up with the most bizarre ways of viewing the world. I can be completely absorbed in self in ways that make even a magical situation all about me and completely uncomfortable. I could be in a room filled with gold and whatever it is, my pleasure, and be completely miserable. Because without that power, not only does it keep me from getting sober, it keeps me from being able to be comfortable inside of myself. So when I'm working on first step, I'm really going back to the idea that I'm not comfortable being inside of me. I'm scared of success. I'm scared of failure. I'm scared of having stuff. I'm scared of not having stuff. I'm scared of things working out. I'm scared of things not working out. I can be scared of whatever it is that's around me that's not currently in a moment. I can get caught up in the weirdest ways. And I have driven my life into the weirdest directions thinking I had something to do with it. The first step is all of that, right? If I can concede that I just don't have the power to run my life, and that my life will probably better be run by performing some actions that try to help other people, and see how that energy is going in other people and helping them, and trying to stay accountable to a vision with that, and trying to do inventories and things to kind of check in to see how I'm doing with that, I get to live an amazing life. You know, My ego would much rather tell you when I got up here I have 29 in the last 32 years, because that sounds way cooler than I got 10 years and I kind of had some other. But I got to tell you, I've lived well over half my life in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the times that I have been able to adhere to that first step, the times I have been able to concede it and go seek a power based on that concession, have been the most magical times of my life. My life sometimes is ridiculous. My hobbies are, I go take pictures of sharks underwater. I'm pretty good at it. I post them a lot. Anybody into sharks? I have a job when I want to have a job that more than supports me. When things are stripped from my life, I'm okay with it. I'm comfortable, because I know that if I live this life, coincidences are going to bombard it in ways where I'm going to be comfortable with myself. And no matter what, it's going to kind of work out. And the gift of that all started with this idea that I can't run it and that something else can. And if I can truly hold on to that idea and run with it, sky's the limit, man. The only time my life has gotten uncomfortable, the only time bad stuff starts to bombard it, is because I got an idea. And I come up with some great ones. Let me tell you about them. And it becomes a me show. And it's usually not about giving. And it's usually about me taking stuff that I don't really need to impress people I don't like, to put me in places I don't even need to be in, with stuff that's junk at the end of the day, like, why is that even in my house? Or I can do this. Hopefully you do too. We'll talk about step 2 next week. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Sober Sunrise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up, as it will help share the message. Until next time, have a great day.